Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host. So today is an historic day. Roe versus Wade was reversed today. Now I don't remember the day in 1973 that it became law, but I always, I kind of thought, even, because I started reading Supreme Court decisions a while ago, certainly when I was in law school. And I always kind of felt like it was possible that Roe would be overturned. But it is still a little bit surprising. And I really think that I think time will tell, but I think it's going to be, some things are going to happen that most people have zero contemplation of the effects of this decision. This decision, for those of you who are not up on the law or have never read Roe or aren't going to read the decision today, Roe was never about abortion. Roe was about personal privacy, and that benchmark has now been rolled back. This is not, this case and any successor cases to it will never be about abortion or any other issue. It'll be about privacy and people's right to privacy. And that has implications in all sorts of ways that I don't think a lot of people get. And it's going to cut terribly in both ways. This is the first time in my life that I can recall an individual right being taken away by the court. That's just not been consistent with American jurisprudence. I shouldn't say consistent. That's just not been a feature of American jurisprudence over the past, 50 years. So anyway, that's the history lesson for today. And so, as you know, or maybe you don't know, and I'll say it, I think that ignorance is kind of an epidemic in America. I think there are a lot of people that are really just ignorant about pretty much everything. And I mean, I'm not saying that to be pejorative or condescending. I just think there is a large percentage of the population that they just don't care about anything. They just don't care about anything that's not like, where they're going to sleep, what they're going to eat, and do they have money to go party with their friends? Do they have a car that works? In other words, nothing that's not right in front of their nose. And a lot of people that are very ignorant, misinformed, they don't just keep that to themselves, they spread it. So it's kind of an epidemic. But the antidote to it, the inoculation for it, is knowledge. And so I'm here to share some knowledge. Now, I've been talking about fuel prices and how it impacts truckers. And I saw a number the other day that was an enormous amount of people have turned in their operating authority. Most of those were probably single or maybe two truck operations, but a lot of people have turned in their operating authority. Doesn't necessarily mean they've gotten out of trucking, but they've definitely gotten away from having their own business, right? They're going back to either company driver positions or leasing. And a lot of it, people say, is because of fuel, but also the spot market has really collapsed, and and actually contract cargo, I should say, really. But contract freight is now becoming a larger percentage of everything that's moved. And the reason I bring all this up is because I commented the other day about about fuel prices and stuff like that. And I commented about Texas, and I commented about Del Taco. Now, I got a positive response about Del Taco. Some people, they mentioned Texas in comments. And by the way, let me say something about Texas today. So, as you may know, the most sought after high school football recruit is Arch Manning. And Arch is a good-looking young guy. He looks like he's a strapping young man, and he's a quarterback. And of course, he comes from a long line of good quarterbacks. His grandfather is Archie Manning. His uncles are Peyton and Eli Manning. His dad is, by the way, his name Cooper. So anyway, Arch, it was the most sought after recruit, and a lot of the biggest names in college football were bandied about, as being in the picture. Alabama, Georgia, Texas. I think there might have been a couple others, right? Mississippi, Ole Miss, but which is where his grandfather and his uncle played. But he has made a decision, and he's going to go play for the Burnt Orange. He's going to go play for the Texas Longhorns. Now, here's the thing I want to say. I'm going to make a prediction. I mean, I'm as good at making sports predictions as any of those knuckleheads on TV. Sorry about the glare. I don't know where that's coming from all of a sudden. Well, I know where it's coming from. The sun. But anyway, here's my prediction about Arch Manning. I think Arch is going to go to Austin, and I think he's going to do very well. I really do. Just because, he's got all the tools. He's got all of the help too, right? But here's the other thing I'm going to predict. Arch is going to go there for 2 years. He's going to light it up. He's going to be talked about for the Heisman Trophy. He's certainly going to, be mentioned. And, the anticipation is going to be huge. And Texas is still going to be a 6-6 team. And the reason I say that is because you can have a quarterback that's really, really good. And, there are plenty of examples in the pros, but also plenty of examples in college where you can have a really good quarterback and you're still not winning a national championship because they don't have the coaching, they don't have the other things in place, right? It's a total package. If Arch Manning had gone to Alabama or Georgia or Clemson or hell, maybe even Michigan, I would have said, or Oregon, I would have said, okay, this is a guy that may just lift them to the next level or back to the same level they're used to being at, in cases like Alabama stuff. But it's not going to happen. Now, the other concern is Arch better have a valid passport, because even though the SEC is going to be part of the United States and, it's going to have teams in the United States and Texas, those college kids are going to need a passport to go to play away games other than at like Texas A&M. So if they go to Oklahoma to play, they're going to need a passport. Or they go to Alabama to play, they're going to need a passport. Also, we already have a precedent for having professional sports leagues across national boundaries here in North America, right? The NHL and Major League Baseball come to mind. So I don't think it's going to be an issue with like the Mavericks or the Cowboys, the Texans, the Spurs, the Astros, whoever, moving cross border. They just need to make sure they got good passports so they, that are acceptable to the United States Customs and Border people. So anyway, that's kind of an update on the Texas thing. Best of luck to Arch. And who knows, maybe this guy is the unicorn. Maybe he's going to take a program that has been wallowing in mediocrity and in 2 years just completely turn it around. If he does that, then he'll deserve 2 Heisman trophies in the same year or something, because It would be exceedingly rare. The one example, though, is I think, just like LSU caught lightning in a bottle when Joe Burrow transferred there. I mean, I think it was just this serendipitous thing for LSU, because it's not like they had a great coach. It's just everything lined up, and they did have some good assistant coaches. But anyway, enough about college football. Let's talk about business. So I was talking about oil prices, and well, actually not oil prices as much as fuel prices. So gas, diesel, right? Stuff that concerns us. And I've already said I think Biden has done more than he should. Like, I think releasing oil from the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve, I thought that was a bad plan because it's a blip on the radar. It really did nothing. Fuel prices went down for a couple of days, straight back up, right? Because it's not moving the needle. The other thing is, I've said he shouldn't interfere by taking away tax dollars from projects to do a gas tax holiday for 3 months. Now, why is he doing all this? And why is he letting the Saudis get away with murder? Because he's a politician. He's trying to get reelected. I get it. Any politician would be doing the same stuff he is. Okay, but here's the deal. Okay, all of this stuff is meaningless. And I'm going to tell you why. I want to take you to oilprice.com. And there's an article on the 22nd, so today's the 24th, but there's an article on the 22nd that basically said, the title of the article is, U.S. oil and gas exports are fueling higher domestic prices. I'm going to say that again. U.S. oil and gas exports are fueling higher domestic prices. And this is an article by Kurt Kopp. And on the other side, I'm going to read a direct quote from the article. It's actually like the first 4 paragraphs, which are the part that deals with fuel. So the other half of the article is about natural gas. If you're driving a truck that runs off natural gas, I'm sorry to hear that. But anyway, listen to this, and I'll come back on the other side and we'll talk about this. But also, I'm going to talk to you about a guy that I consulted just yesterday who is a close friend, and he is in the oil and gas industry, and I'm going to get his impression of drilling and stuff like that. And he works up in North Dakota in the Bakken Shale. So anyway, listen to the quote from this article. So here's the statement, or here's the language verbatim from the piece. The U.S. oil and natural gas industry long fought for, and in the last decade finally won release from federal restrictions that limited exports. The ostensible reason for that was that because of the so-called shale revolution, and we'll talk about the Bakken Shale in a minute, in the country's oil and gas fields, the United States would have plenty of oil and gas to share for export. The real reason behind the push was that the oil and gas industry wanted what almost every other industry in America already had: the right to sell their products to the highest bidders no matter where they lived on the globe. This made it almost certain that as U.S. prices rose to match world prices, U.S. consumers would feel the pain. And since energy prices affect everyone who votes, they are always politically consequential. So it is unsurprising that with the U.S. regular gasoline prices over $5 per gallon, President Joe Biden lashed out at U.S. oil companies, which are having one of their best years ever, saying they need to increase production of refined oil products. The companies have responded that their refineries are running at close to maximum capacity, and so there's not much they can do in the short run. What is left unsaid is that it has long been the policy of the United States to allow the export of refined, as opposed to crude, petroleum products such as gasoline, diesel, and heating oil. The country has a refinery capacity significantly in excess of domestic needs, and so exports a considerable volume of refined products, including about 1 million barrels per day of gasoline and 1.4 million barrels per day of diesel and heating oil for the week ending June 10th. If the U.S. were to curtail such exports in order to reduce prices at home, the country would be violating long-term commitments to free trade and free markets, and would be reducing supply and thus raising prices for customers abroad. End of quote. Okay, so you can hear from the article that the reason that fuel prices are high is not because of anything that's being done right now other than allowing free enterprise. Now, Biden has said, he's kind of going after oil companies. That's political posturing too, right? We're not going to tax them for windfall profits. We don't tax other businesses for windfall profits, I don't think. I just think it's the market, right? The market is what the market is. And if you want the federal government to intervene in a way that tilts the market in favor of the consumer over legitimate businesses, then that's a slippery slope. Because then what if somebody says, oh, wait a minute, the price of broccoli is exceedingly high and I want something done about it. And next thing you know, broccoli growers are being told to charge less, and grocery stores are being told to charge less. Fuel, gas, diesel, is a commodity, right? It's no different than bacon, okay? Bacon is a commodity. You don't believe me? Go look at the farm report and see what pork bellies sell for. There's a commodity market for all of that. There's a commodity market for copper. There's a commodity market for oil. There's a commodity market for bacon, pork bellies, okay? It's just the economy, okay? This is not rocket science. But the federal government does not really have any impact other than with taxes that they put on fuel, but they don't have any impact on the base price of fuel. So if you're one of those people that thinks, oh, well, I don't like Biden, so let's blame it on him, that's fine. But shit, why don't you just blame it on somebody else that you don't like? Like, maybe you don't like, I don't know, Madonna, or maybe you don't like Reggie Jackson, or maybe you don't like me. Blame it on anybody you don't like. But the fact of the matter is, it'll still be a lie that the person you're blaming it on has any impact on it, right? Why? Because this is U.S. economic policy in a global marketplace, okay? And people are like, oh, well, the United States, we can produce enough oil to cover our own needs. Well, yeah, that's true. But we can also produce enough of a lot of things to cover our own needs. But let me tell you something. When beef prices are going up, I don't hear anybody bitching about the price of steaks. But guess what? We export a ton of beef. Not just a ton, probably like millions of tons of beef. You see, when you go, if you drive for Prime and you've been to a meat packing plant, especially beef or pork, I guarantee that you've seen refrigerated ocean containers there, if you've looked very hard. Well, guess what? Those refrigerated ocean containers aren't going to Cleveland. They're going to, they're going to Shanghai, right? They're going to the port at Yokosuka, Japan, or they're going to, you name it, right? It's going somewhere else, okay? That makes the price artificially higher here. Why? Because we produce enough to keep the price of beef and bacon low, but we want to sell it the producers, the businesses, the free marketeers, they want to sell it at a place they get a better price. And so even the cost, adding the cost of shipping, and this is going to be true with the diesel fuel and the gas too, even adding in the cost of shipping, they're still making more profit than if they sold the diesel or gas here at the Loves in South Carolina, where I am right now. That's just a fact of life. But let's go back and also talk about this idea that the Biden administration cut back or basically rescinded the open auction of oil and gas leases that the Trump administration had opened up. In other words, Trump said, we're going to sell more oil and gas leases on federal land to make gas and oil, fuel cheaper. And the Biden administration said, well, no, we're not going to do that. We don't want more oil and gas drilling on, federal land. And by the way, does it make sense to give a lease to somebody and then have them price gouge the citizenry? That property is ours anyway. I'm a U.S. citizen. U.S., land controlled by the Bureau of Land Management, that belongs to me. It belongs to you. It belongs to all of us. So but that's a different story. But so I called somebody who is very close to me. He's actually a family member. And he and his father have both, and also his father-in-law, have all worked or do all work in the North Dakota oil fields, the Bakken Shale. Now remember, in the quote that I did, it talked about that oil companies convinced U.S. regulators, commerce regulators, and economic policy people that because of all the shale deposits, oil in shale, in the United States and maybe in North America, but certainly in the United States, we could afford to export other oil. And that other oil is probably West Texas crude, or we could afford to refine crude into gas and diesel and export those million-plus barrels per day, okay? Because of the notion that we had all these reserves. Now, the notion is true, but here's the rub. Even without any new oil or gas leases, there are hundreds of wells in this country that are producing no crude oil. And the answer is, the reason they're not, and this is according to my source who works in the oil service industry. So he doesn't just work on one well. He's not a roughneck. He actually is on the calls in North Dakota, on the conference calls, where they plan which wells are going to be fracked. See, they drill wells, but they don't start producing until they start fracking them. Okay, at least in the shale. Okay, West Texas, they drill wells, and if they don't have to frack, then they can just produce. But sometimes they just drill wells to get it done, so that when another well dries up, they already have a well that they know that they've capped, that they can say, oh, let's shift this crew over. But here's what my source says. He has been on these calls. He said the fracking schedule is planned about a year out. And I said, well, what if there were more leases being given? And he said that wouldn't have any impact on fuel prices in the near term. He said, because even if somebody got a lease today, he said they probably couldn't drop anything in the ground till 2023 or 2024. And that's just the initial part of it, okay? And he said there are tons of wells that are not being fracked that could be, but they don't have enough personnel. They're short on crews, which, this is the new economy, right? They're short on crews, and they can't frack anymore anyway. But even if, but they already have a fracking schedule. And so all of this stuff is planned months in advance. In other words, Biden's been the president since January of 2021. It's June of 2022. the conference for so what I'm saying is that within a couple of months after Biden became president, they were already planning what they were going to be fracking this summer or back in April. In other words, they're not producing any more than they otherwise would have. And even still, with that production just being kind of capped at whatever the industry wanted to, they're exporting. They're exporting. Why? Because Europeans and Asians will pay more for the product than Americans will. But economics is a study of scarcity. So there is a much higher demand right now because we're post-COVID. It's the summertime when way more people travel. And gas always goes up in the summer because it's a different blend than they have in the winter. That's gas, not diesel. Diesel's the same year round. But the reason that fuel prices are high has absolutely nothing to do with how much drilling we're doing or whether Joe Biden's attacking the oil industry. And you know, again, it's political posturing. The oil industry's going nowhere. The oil industry will eventually go almost out of business, except for like lubricants. But even then, we're going to get to a point where lubricants are a tiny part of the overall picture, because when we move to all electric, you know, trucks, and there are fleets that are already buying them. When, you know, we have less internal combustion engines, you know, we're going to need less lubricants. You're still going to have transaxles. You're still going to have transmissions, perhaps. You're going to need lubricants, but that's a tiny, tiny part of the oil and gas industry. And so if you think that there's something amiss, like I had one guy tell me, well, it's a conspiracy, basically. Go figure, right? It's a conspiracy because Biden said he wanted to get rid of oil and gas when he was on the campaign trail. And I don't recall it because I didn't pay much attention to the campaign, but I think that Biden meant the Green New Deal. In other words, you know, he wanted to enable renewable energy to compete, and eventually he thought that would put oil and gas out of business. And it will. But I think the market's going to control that. It's not going to matter. Policy's not going to matter. People are just going to, I mean, I go all over the country, right? There's more and more solar and wind every day. Now, I know a lot of people think that the sun and the wind are Democrats, but I don't think that's true. Geothermal, maybe the Democrat. But most other renewable sources, I don't even think they vote. So, you know, and even, by the way, even in places that are Republican strongholds, windmills all over the damn place. I mean, windmill cancer running rampant, and solar panels blinding you everywhere you go. That's just the new economy, right? People realize that I can do something different than pay an oil company or a coal mine. That's progress, right? That's progress. You know, 60 years ago, the railroad industry went to diesel locomotives. Do you know how much less coal America used after that happened? A lot. Did anybody say, oh, the railroads are anti-coal? No, it was just progress. Okay, diesel engines were progress over steam locomotives. It's not a conspiracy. It's just people are going to go to the easiest, most efficient, most economical method. Which, by the way, is exactly what the oil and gas companies are doing. They're going to the easiest money. And that's why fuel prices are high. The way we could lower them, cut consumption. The way you cut consumption, obviously, people slow down. More people have electric vehicles. More people have windmills. More people have solar. Those are the ways you cut fossil fuel costs. So anyway, I know this is probably not what a lot of people wanted to hear because it's based in fact. I know that a lot of people wanted to blame Biden for the high fuel prices, but it's really not his fault. He can't lower them, he can't raise them. That's a good thing. He can't raise them either. I do think that a tax holiday, a fuel tax holiday, is a bad plan. Federal fuel taxes have been basically the same spot for a long time, and the roads in America are horrible. I mean, honestly, I think if the roads were made significantly better, what people like you and I would save on tires, and oh, by the way, bad roads cause worse fuel economy. All other things being equal, bad roads are harder on fuel economy than smooth roads, right? But tires, how many of you have had to replace a tire because you pull into a terminal and there's some big chunk out of it? Do you think that big chunk came out because you were running on nice, smooth, well-maintained roads? No. I've had suspension parts on my tractor broken. You know, when I hit a bridge deck where it's like 1.5 inches or 2 inches off from the road surface, and the thing just seems like it bottoms out. You know, we need money to fix that. We need to demand better roads. It would also make my neck feel better. So anyway, thanks for watching. I appreciate everybody. I'm gonna have another video out because on a different subject. It's about a big private equity purchase in the trucking industry, but I don't like to mix subjects really on videos because, you know, YouTube says you got to keep them separated. So come out and play, watch my next video, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.